And what a warm voice he has. Can't compete with that. Reminds me of Chris Rea a little bit. Weird reference, I know. Okay, let's keep it going with our next writer. She is a ukulele playing rock writer, songwriter, and the award-winning author of fiction and non-fiction books. And her latest is New York Times bestseller called I'm Your Man, The Life of Leonard Cohen, that you can buy over there for $16.99 for Christmas. Please welcome on stage Sylvie Simmons.
Well, apart from S.B. Stokes, I would say that Leonard Cohen is the master of erotic menace in his poetry and his song. And because of the theme of tonight, I was just sitting there, I didn't even look through any lyrics, but just from memory, thought of some of the ones that he had written that might apply. So I'm going to start with that. These are my sexy librarian class. It's 99 cents. This is from a recent song of Leonard's called Show Me the Place. Show me the place where you want your slave to go. Show me the place where my head is bending low. Show me the place where the suffering began. There were chains, and so I loved you like a slave. This is my song called Is This What You Wanted? You were the sensitive woman, I was the Reverend Freud. You were the manual orgasm, I was a dirty little boy. You were Marlon Brando, I was Steve McQueen. I'm Steve McQueen, you could be Marlon. You were KY Jelly, I was Vaseline. And my favorite line, you were the whore and the beast of Babylon. I was Rin Tin Tin. Is this what you wanted? Yes, I think so, Leonard. Thank you. You who wish to conquer pain, you must learn to serve me well. You must learn what makes me kind. The crumbs of love you offer me are the crumbs I've left behind. Your pain has no credential here. It's just the shadow of my wound. I have begun to long for you. This is missing another song, boys. His fingernails, I see they're broken. His ships are all on fire. The moneylender's lovely little daughter, she's eaten with desire. She tempts him with a clarinet. She waves a Nazi dagger. And of course, in the song, I'm Your Man. If you want to love her, I'll do it. I will actually read it in a sober voice. I'll do anything you ask me to. And if you want another kind of love, I'll wear a mask for you. Oh, the moon's too bright, your chains are too tight. The beast won't fall asleep. I'd crawl to you and fall at your feet. I'd howl at your beauty like a dog in heat. I'd claw at you and tear your sheet and say, please, I'm your man. Which was the title I gave my book, I'm Your Man. What else could it have been? And I spent nearly 3 years pretty much stalking poor Leonard. He was very good about it. It's actually really cool because if you're somebody's biographer and they approve of you, they support you, as they say. I don't remember getting the check man, but they're looking after you in that regard. That you get to spend time with them, and spending time with Leonard Cohen is kind of 1 minute you're like you're in the room with Moses, and then the next minute it's the dirty little boy, like as mentioned in his own lyrics. And I think one of the things he liked is that, I think one of the things about English people in general is that we are kind of genetically inclined to blush. And even though I feel that I'm unshockable, my cheeks kind of give the game away sometimes. And I remember a recent conversation we'd had when I was having a fight with the publisher of my book, trying to keep it intact, which I won. But Leonard had asked me if I was okay. I think he was seeing if I was going to starve to death or needed any money. And I said I was fine. And he went to his garden and snipped 3 grapefruits from the tree. They were perfect. perfect. He arranged them like a Dutch painting, you know, on the table. And I said, but you know, maybe you should just sign the grapefruits and when they shrivel, I'll sell them on eBay. And again, with Leonard, there's always a jazz pause before he answers, and he said, darling, there's no shriveling in this house. And so even now, my little English cheeks are pinking up just a touch. Well, I'm going to read a little. I'm going to be very, very boring and read the prologue, but it's very short, so if you don't like it, at least it introduces him. He is a courtly man, elegant with old world manners. He bows when he meets you, stands when you leave, makes sure you're comfortable, and makes no mention of the fact that he's not. The discreet stroking of Greek worry beads he carries in his pocket gives the game away. By inclination, he's a private man, rather shy. But if probing is required, he'll put his feet in the stirrups with dignity and humour. He chooses his words carefully, like a poet or a politician, with a habit of precision, an ear for their sound, and a talent and a taste for deflection and mystery. He is always like smoke and mirrors, and yet there's something conspiratorial in the way he talks, as there is when he sings, as if he were imparting an intimate secret. He is a trim man, there's no excess to him at all, and smaller than you might think, ship-shape. You imagine he wouldn't find it hard to wear a uniform. Right now he's wearing a suit. It's dark, pinstriped, double-breasted, and if it's off the rack, it doesn't look it. Darling, says Leonard, I was born in a suit. And it's quite amazing that Leonard's very clever. He calls all women darling. I actually heard from a few men, actually, that he calls them darling too, so he has this sort of generic term for them. And he had a very interesting life. You know, he came from a very well-to-do family. He never denied that he was born on the right side of the tracks. And his family, apart from having rabbis going back as far as the eye could see, were also presidents of really big major businesses in Montreal, Canada, where he was raised. And his father had taken over the presidency of a very high-end suit company. And so when Leonard was a kid, he and his best friend used to design suits, so they got the help to make up for them. So he was kind of raised in a suit, if not born in a suit. And then when he was 9 years old, something happened that was very shocking. Though he said to me he didn't cry, somehow it had left a very deep scar on him. His father died, which left him pretty much the only man in the house. He had an older sister and a mother who doted on him. And I think that this kind of pretty much set the pattern for his life, where women were there for support. They encouraged him to kind of break away and be a poet and a novelist, which he was before he became a musician, and very successfully so in Canada. But they allowed him to do that and not just have to step into the kind of family shoes that was probably, what he would have been heading for otherwise. But at the same time, that kind of smothering love was something he spent most of his life running away from, but not before writing about the women who inspired all of his songs and poetry. But I'll just do a little reading now. It's one that I kind of like too, partly because it's short, and this is such a long book. But it seems to me such a significant thing. It's from a chapter called House of Women. And Leonard had told me that he started getting interested in women other than his mother and sister. He got interested in them as sort of sex objects when he was 11, but we all know boys exaggerate. I think it was probably around 13. And as a kid, he'd really been interested in magic. He had a magic kit for his birthday when he was young and got pretty good at that. And then he started to learn hypnotism. And so I think this is the secret to Leonard's success, and I'm going to read this part. In his early teens, Leonard developed a keen interest in hypnosis. Wind chimes, isn't it lovely? Or maybe it's Leonard calling on my private self. No, that actually comes up as 70s porn music, so no. He acquired a slim pocket-sized anonymously written book with the title 25 Lessons in Hypnotism, How to Become an Expert Operator, and the extravagant claim of, quote, being the most perfect, complete, easily learned, comprehensive course in the world, embracing magnetic healing, telepathy, mind reading, clairvoyant hypnosis, mesmerism, animal magnetism, and kindred sciences. It turned out Leonard had a natural talent for mesmerism. Finding instant success with domestic animals, he moved on to the domestic staff, recruiting as his first subject the family maid. At his direction, the young woman sat on the Chesterfield sofa. Leonard drew a chair alongside her and, as the book instructed, told her in a slow, gentle voice to relax and look in his eyes. Picking up a pencil, he moved it slowly in front of her face, back and forth, and succeeded in putting her in a trance. Disregarding or depending on one's interpretation following the author's directive that his teachings should only be used for educational purposes, Leonard instructed the maid to undress. And she did. I think at this point, can we all sing Hallelujah? Poor guy. I mean, he got up to his 13th birthday without seeing a naked woman. It must have been terribly hard on him. Anyway, what a moment it must have been for the adolescent Leonard, this successful fusion of arcane wisdom and sexual longing. To sit beside a naked woman, I suspect she just undid a few buttons, but still got face, in his own home, convinced that he made this happen simply by talent, study, mastery of an art, and imposition of his will. When he found it difficult to awaken her, Leonard started to panic. He was terrified his mother would come home and catch them. Though one imagines this would have simply added a sense of impending doom, despair, and loss to the head he makes that would make it even more exquisitely Leonard Cohen-esque. Chapter 2 of the manual might have been written as career advice to the singer and performer Leonard would eventually become. It cautioned against any appearance of levity and instructed, quote, "Your features should be set firm and stern. Be quiet in all your actions. Let your voice grow lower to just above a whisper. Pause a moment or two. You will fail if you try to hurry." When Leonard recreated the episode in his 20s in The Favourite Game, his first novel, he wrote, he had never seen a woman so naked. He was astonished, happy, and frightened before all the spiritual authorities of the universe. Then he sat back to stare. This is what he had waited so long to see. He wasn't disappointed, and never has been. Although it's ascribed to a fictionalized alter ego, it's hard to imagine these sentiments were not Leonard's own. Decades later, he will still say, quote, "I don't think a man ever gets over that first sight of the naked woman. I think that's Eve standing over him. That's the morning and the dew on the skin. And I think that's the major content of every man's imagination. All the sad adventures in pornography and love and song are just steps on the path towards that holy vision." The maid, incidentally, was a ukulele player, an instrument his fictional alter ego took for a lute, and the girl by extension for an angel. And everybody knows that naked angels possess a portal to the divine. I believe that the hypnotism still works. So I did an event in New York, I think it was towards the end of last year, and with Suzanne Vega, we were talking, and she's a friend of Leonard Cohen's, and they bonded over poetry, and he always got into being a poet, as he said, because it was a way of getting the girls interested. And it was in a time, as he was born in 1934, it was a time before rock and roll had ever come along, so that was what you got. The poets were the rock stars, if you like, at their time. But Suzanne told the story. They were sitting outside the Sunset Marquis Hotel in LA. There was a big swimming pool, and Leonard's back was to the pool, and she was looking at the pool. There were these lovely women in sun lounges around the pool. And he had asked her if she would read some of the new lyrics that she'd been writing, and so she read them. And when she was done, and said, "Now, okay, Leonard, what have you been writing lately? Read something to me." And Leonard always has a notebook in his pocket or somewhere about him. Takes it out and leafs through it and starts to read. It was probably a shopping list, but the way that Leonard Cohen reads it makes it special. But he was reading, and she was watching over his shoulder as he read, and saw that it was almost like dogs' ears were kind of pricking up at the sound of a whistle. These women around the pool were clearly reacting to the this long-distance sound of Leonard Cohen's hypnotic voice, and they started kind of moving their chairs nearer and nearer. And apparently it was quite a long thing that he read, because at the end of it, she said to him, Leonard, she has this kind of very little kind of sort of sweet primness about her. This is Aunt Vega. She goes, Leonard, did you see what happened? All these women kind of got closer and gathered around him when you spoke. He paused a little and he said, works every time. So I'm not sure, what time have I got left? I was told I had like 12 minutes or so, but I might have used those up. Can somebody advise so I don't overstay my welcome? Keep going. All right, well, I'm going to do another little reading then. I could have bought an egg timer and then it would have all been fine. Well, this is another story I like so much, just because, you know, as I say, Leonard has loved many women. It got to the point in Canada when I was doing the research up in Montreal where it was like, hands up if you haven't, you know, it was getting to that point. So anyway, there was one woman who turned him down, who he pursued for years and with such passion and such complete and utter focus. And that was a woman you might have heard of called Nico, who was the singer of the Velvet Underground and became a solo singer and is unfortunately no longer on the planet. And he tried everything to woo her. And it was before he was actually a musician. He'd come to New York to try and record an album. And he sort of fell in with Andy Warhol's set. And that was where he saw her perched in a bar like an ice queen. And he tried to make her love him, and it wouldn't work. But Nico was not without suitors. I mean, she always had that kind of Germanic, slightly S&M quality to her that Leonard is rather fond of. You know, the Nazi blonde girls that he has going for him. And so I think she really enjoyed spurning him more than actually being with him. And she's had such a curious background, you know. She'd actually recorded an album with Serge Gainsbourg, if any of you know him. He was the last person I wrote a biography of before Leonard Cohen. And she'd done a song with him, and he couldn't bear her voice because it didn't sound like a 4-year-old. And then she did a song that Jimmy Page produced, of all people. And then she had a son by Alain Delon, one of the most gorgeous men that has ever existed on planet Earth, as far as I'm concerned. And she got Bob Dylan to babysit their kid while she went out with other men. So she had ways. And if she was still alive, I would be her disciple in a second. Because I ain't got them ways. And Bob Dylan gave her a ticket to go out to New York, and she thought that maybe his manager wanted to manage her singing career. He didn't. And so Andy Warhol took her in and put her in the film Chelsea Girls, and she became a kind of star with her than that. And he put her in the Velvet Underground, which was a group that he managed. Pushed poor little Lou Reed out the way and shoved her up front as a singer. So this was a little bit of a story about that. I'll probably jump around, so try and get through. Here we go. Nico told Leonard she liked younger men and did not make an exception. Her young man du jour, her guitar player, was a fresh-faced singer-songwriter from Southern California, barely 18 years old, named Jackson Brown. A server boy crossed with an angel, his natural good looks appeared unnatural alongside the cadaverous Warhol and his black-clad entourage. Brown had gone to New York on an adventure. Some friends were driving cross-country and needed to split the gas bill. Brown grabbed his acoustic guitar and his mother's credit card. When they rolled into Manhattan, looking up through the back window, he saw, quote, all these gorgeous posters of Nico everywhere, amazing. They were advertising her solo shows. Opening the show was Tim Buckley, a singer-songwriter that Brown knew from the Orange County Coffee House circuit. Buckley said Nico was looking for a full-time electric guitarist. He didn't want to do it. He lent Jackson his guitar. Nico opened the door to her apartment. She looked him up and down with a famous stare, and liking what she saw, invited him in. She sang the boy her songs and he assured her he could play them. She asked if he had any songs, and he did, though he didn't have a record deal. The first song he played Nico was These Days, an exquisite pensive ballad he wrote when he was 16 after his second acid trip. Says Brown, she said, I will do this song. Everybody impersonated Nico. She chose 2 more of his songs and appointed him a new accompanist and lover, both effective. For Suzanne, which Judy Collins had covered, and he had this really great book he'd written, Beautiful Losers, which he seemed embarrassed about for some reason. And he'd come to the club where we played, and we'd just sit there in the front row at the table and write and stare at her. The picture he paints is reminiscent of Death in Venice, a solemn love-struck old writer, and at 32 years old, Leonard would have seemed old to the 18-year-old Brown, mooning over a dangerous, unattainable beauty. Brown simply assumed Leonard was writing her a song, and in a way he was, although he was hoping for more than a cover. Leonard befriended the pair of them. Sir Jackson, he would read us the poems he wrote while he watched her. Very dreamy, amazing poems. And he would follow them about to various sort of haunts of the demi-monde in New York. But as Jackson said, I really dug Nico. That was when she left him for an even younger boy. So did Leonard, though he never won her. He was, quote, madly in love with her. Exclaims Danny Fields. Danny Fields is this kind of A&R man who was very established in New York. His roommate was Edie Sedgwick, and he'd signed MC5 and people. Exclaims Danny Fields, she didn't fuck Leonard, she fucked Louis, for God's sake, and Nico worshipped Leonard. She'd call him up, Leonard. That's the way she said his name. What do you think, Leonard? Do you like my songs? She was a girl of conflicted emotions. Though consistent in her taste in men, after Jackson Browne, Nico moved on to Jim Morrison and Jimi Hendrix, both in their early 20s. Now this is a little conversation with Leonard. So occasionally we stop and have a conversation. This is Leonard. I bumped into Jim Morrison a couple of times. And Hendrix, we actually jammed together one night in New York. I forget the name of the club, but I was there, he was there. And he knew my song Suzanne, so we jammed on it. You and Hendrix jammed on Suzanne. What the hell did he do with it? Oh, he was very gentle. He didn't distort his guitar. It was a lovely thing. And I bumped into him again, I remember. I was walking up 23rd Street, which is the street the Chelsea Hotel was on, and I was with Joni Mitchell, a very beautiful woman, and a big limousine pulled up, and Jimi Hendrix was in the back seat. And he was chatting up Joni from the inside of the limo. It didn't matter that she was with another man, specifically you. Well, you know, he was a very elegant man, so it wasn't impolite. Joni didn't go off with him, but Nico did. I went with Nico to hear Jim Morrison, who was playing at a club, and Hendrix showed up, and he was glorious, very beautiful. I'd come with Nico. When it was time to go, I said, let's go, and she said, I'm going to stay. You go. Some years later, Leonard and Nico bumped into each other in a Spanish restaurant and bar, El Quixote. When the bar closed, they wound up in Leonard's room in the Chelsea Hotel next door. It was a smaller guest room Leonard was only passing through, and so they sat together on the bed, side by side, continuing the conversation. At one point, feeling encouraged, Leonard put a hand on her arm. Nico swung around and hit him so hard he levitated off the bed. Says Danny Fields, there are stories of her flares up and physical brutality. Her other brutality, the passive brutality, was making you wonder what she was thinking so much that people fell in love with her. Maybe she wanted him to be a caveman conqueror because men were so afraid of her. Nico loved Leonard, we all did. But in 1967, feeling, quote, he had no skill and had forgotten how to court a lady, Leonard went back alone to his hotel room. His thoughts full of Nico, he wrote The Jewels in Her Shoulder. It was a song of his that never came out. Take This Longing, then titled The Bells, both of which he later taught Nico to play. She was both the tallest and blondest girl in the song Memories and the muse for Joan of Arc. Leonard said, this song was written for a German girl I used to know. She's a great singer. I love her songs. I recently read an interview where she was asked about me and my work, and she said I was, quote, completely unnecessary. She also inspired the song One of Us Cannot Be Wrong, that was on his first album. After one of the occasions on which Nico spurned him, he went back to his room and, quote, indulged myself in the black magic of candles. And I married these 2 wax candles, and I married the smoke of 2 kinds of sandalwood. and I did many bizarre and occult practices that resulted in nothing at all except an enduring friendship. And I'll stop there. Thank you very much.